My brother's new wife asked me to save his estate for her. That sentence still echoes in my head. Not because of what she said, but how she said it. Soft, rehearsed, like she'd practiced the words in front of a mirror. It was the kind of request that sounds innocent until you realize it isn't a request at all. It's a warning. That day, I remember sitting at the dining table of the old family house, sunlight leaking through the lace curtains. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and dust, the scent of something too clean on the surface, too neglected underneath. My brother Daniel sat at the head of the table, shoulders slightly hunched, tapping his pen on a folder full of legal papers. He'd just married Clara 3 months before. She was sitting beside him, perfectly poised in her cream blouse and pearls, her hair gathered in a neat bun. The kind of woman who always looked ready for a photograph. I used to think Daniel looked happiest around her. But that morning he looked tired, his eyes distant, like he was watching a movie no one else could see. Clara smiled at me, the way someone does when they want to sound kind but not be questioned. "Evelyn," she said, "you've always been the responsible one. You understand the business, the estate, everything your father built. Daniel and I were just hoping you could help us sort out the paperwork. To, save things." Her tone lingered on that word. Save. I didn't understand what needed saving. The estate had been stable for years. Father's vineyard might not have been grand, but it supported itself. We'd grown up among those rows of vines, dirt under our fingernails, laughter echoing down the hill at sunset. So I asked, save it from what? That's when Daniel looked up for the first time. His lips parted, but no words came. Clara reached over, covering his hand with hers. "He's been under so much stress," she said quickly. "Some unexpected expenses. A few financial missteps." Her eyes met mine, steady, unblinking. "We just need your signature to keep things smooth. It's what your father would have wanted." I didn't sign that day. Something in her voice, too polished, too certain, made me pause. And that was the first time I realized. The estate wasn't the only thing that needed saving. Normal life/setup. Before Clara, my world with Daniel was simple. Predictable, even. Our father, Henry Jameson, had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving behind his vineyard in Sonoma County and a modest but well-loved house on the property. I'd taken over the books, the numbers, the bills, the taxes, because Daniel was more of a dreamer. He preferred pruning vines, planning expansions, and talking to investors. I preferred keeping things grounded. We made a good team. Most mornings, I'd wake early to the sound of the old kettle whistling. Daniel would be outside already, his boots muddy, the air around him smelling like crushed grapes and wet soil. He'd wave at me through the kitchen window, grin like a kid. "Coffee first, then miracles," he'd shout. I'd shake my head and laugh. That was our rhythm. When Clara arrived, that rhythm changed. Daniel met her at a fundraising gala in the city, a wine charity event he'd been invited to after our vineyard got featured in a local magazine. He came home starry-eyed, talking about this woman who understood ambition. I remember the first dinner she attended at our home. She wore a navy dress that looked far too expensive for a vineyard visit, and she brought an expensive bottle of Bordeaux as a gift. I could tell she was used to being admired. Her voice soft, her compliments perfectly placed. She called me Evie right away. No one but Daniel ever called me that. I wanted to like her, I really did. But she had this way of touching everything. Our father's portrait, the wooden furniture, even the old family Bible, as if measuring its worth. Still, Daniel looked happy. And after years of watching him work himself to the bone, that was enough for me. When they got married 6 months later, I stood by his side, smiling through my doubts. The wedding was small, held at the vineyard under the oak tree where our parents used to host harvest picnics. The guests toasted to new beginnings. Clara looked radiant in lace. Daniel cried when he said his vows. And me? I just prayed she loved him for who he was, not for what he owned. But prayers, as I've learned, don't always protect you from people who know how to sound like angels. The months that followed were strange. Daniel stopped calling me every morning. When I visited the estate office, the books were often in review or handled by Clara. She said she'd taken over the finances to free him up for creative direction. I tried to trust her. After all, I had my own life in the city, my job at the local library, My small apartment filled with quiet and books. But sometimes, in the evenings, I'd drive past the vineyard and notice lights still on in the main house long after midnight. Once I saw Daniel pacing outside, phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp, unlike the calm brother I knew. When I asked him about it the next day, he brushed it off. Just investors, he said. Clara's handling it. That was his new phrase. Clara's handling it. And she was too much if you ask me. A few weeks later came that breakfast meeting, the one where she asked me to save the estate. Something about her words stuck under my skin, like a splinter I couldn't pull out. That night, I went through my father's old files. Everything about the estate, the trust, the vineyard. It was all there, neatly labeled in my handwriting. I noticed something odd. Several accounts that used to list both Daniel and me as beneficiaries were now marked pending revision. No one had told me about that. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I stopped by unannounced. Clara answered the door, her expression freezing for a split second before she smiled. Evie, what a surprise. Daniel's out checking the lower fields. Coffee. Her tone was bright, but her hand trembled slightly as she gestured for me to come in. As she poured coffee, I scanned the kitchen table. A folder sat half open near her elbow. Papers with letterheads I didn't recognize. Legal documents? I asked casually. Oh, just some estate planning, she said too quickly, flipping it closed. We're streamlining things, simplifying. You know how messy your father's records were. Messy. My father's records were many things, but messy wasn't one of them. I nodded, smiled, and sipped the bitter coffee. Of course, I said. But inside, my suspicion bloomed like rot under sunlight. That was the day I decided to start keeping copies of everything. Emails, letters, even old bank receipts. I didn't know what Clara was doing yet. But I knew one thing for certain. She was planning something that had nothing to do with saving the estate, and everything to do with owning it. It started small, little details that didn't fit. A new car in the driveway, silver and spotless, though Daniel had always driven the old pickup our father left him. A new assistant showing up at the vineyard office, a young man named Logan who introduced himself as Clara's consultant. When I asked what he consulted on, he smiled politely and said, everything. Daniel seemed distracted whenever I stopped by. Once, while he was pruning the vines, I mentioned the new luxury SUV. He wiped sweat from his brow, looked down and said, she got a good deal. Lease not purchase. Then he changed the subject. Another time, I found an invoice for a remodeling project. Tens of thousands of dollars spent on renovations for the guest house. But the guest house had always been fine. It had been our father's study, a quiet place where Daniel used to read to me when we were kids. When I peeked in one afternoon, I found something unexpected, toys. A small wooden crib. A basket of baby clothes. No one in our family had a baby. I remember standing there, frozen, the sunlight slanting through the blinds, dust swirling like ghosts. The crib was new, assembled recently. And the clothes, tiny onesies, soft blankets, smelled faintly of lavender detergent. I backed out quietly, heart pounding. That evening, I called Daniel. Are you and Clara expecting? I asked carefully. There was a pause, then a small laugh. No. Why? I hesitated. Just wondering. I saw a few things in the guest house. He exhaled, long and heavy. Clara's helping a friend. You know how she is. Always taking on other people's problems. I told her not to clutter the place, but well, she means well. His explanation was easy, maybe too easy. I didn't push. Not yet. Over the next few weeks, the vineyard felt different. Staff I'd known for years suddenly avoided eye contact. A few even quit without notice. When I asked around, one of them, an older woman named Rosa, pulled me aside. Señorita Evelyn, she whispered. La Señora, the new one, she changed everything. Pay late, tell us not to talk to Daniel without her. Not right. My stomach tightened. She's controlling payroll? Rosa nodded quickly, fear flickering in her eyes. And papers. Many papers. I thanked her and slipped her a small envelope later that day, just to make sure she had enough for rent. Something was happening behind the scenes, something more dangerous than just restructuring. The turning point came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I had gone into town to meet with an old family lawyer, Mr. Adams, to review the estate's annual filings. I wanted to make sure everything was legitimate before signing anything Clara pushed my way. As he flipped through the documents, his expression changed from neutral to troubled. He removed his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and said softly, "Evelyn, did you authorize a revision of your father's trust last month?" I frowned. "No." "Why?" He turned the paper toward me. My father's familiar signature line stared back, but below it, in neat handwriting, was Clara's name, labeled acting proxy. How is that even possible?" I whispered. "She presented a marriage certificate and Daniel's co-ownership rights," Mr. Adams said. "She claimed your family agreed to streamline management. The document transfers a large portion of estate control, liquid assets especially, into a new joint account, in her and Daniel's name." My pulse roared in my ears. "She can't do that without my consent." He sighed. "Technically she can with Daniel's, but the speed and scope of it, it's suspicious." Suspicious. That was one word for it. Predatory was another. I left the office trembling. Outside, the late afternoon air felt heavy, pressing against my lungs. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, trying to steady my breath. Memories of my father came back to me. The way he'd warn us about people who smile too easily, who love the idea of wealth more than the work behind it. "Don't mistake charm for character, Evie," he used to say. "A liar always polishes their shoes." That evening, I drove straight to the vineyard. When I arrived, I found Daniel sitting alone on the porch, a half-empty glass of wine in front of him. The sunset behind him turned the fields gold, but his eyes were hollow. "Daniel," I said, sitting beside him. "We need to talk." He gave me a tired smile. "I figured you'd come sooner or later." "Did you know Clara revised the trust?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared out at the vines. "She said it was just paperwork, something to protect the estate from taxes." "Taxes?" I snapped, unable to hold back. "She transferred our inheritance into her name, Daniel. That's not protection. That's theft." He flinched, but his voice stayed calm. "You don't know her like I do. She's done everything for me. She's helping us grow. She brought in investors, new buyers. She's saving the business." There was that word again. Saving. I shook my head slowly. Saving it for who? He looked at me then, eyes tired and red. "You don't understand, Evie. I've made mistakes. Debts. She's been cleaning them up. She said she'd fix everything if I just let her handle it." My throat tightened. "Daniel, she's not fixing anything. She's isolating you." He looked away, jaw tight. "You're wrong." I wanted to reach out, shake him, beg him to see what I saw, but he was too deep under her spell. Instead, I stood, holding back tears. "If you won't protect what's ours, I will." He didn't stop me when I walked away. That night, I printed everything, every document I had, every record, every email. I laid them out on my kitchen floor, the papers forming a messy mosaic of betrayal. In one email, Clara had CC'd someone named Peterson. The subject line read, "Transfer complete. Child arrangements next." Child arrangements. My chest went cold. I dug deeper, tracing that name through the estate's financial logs. There were regular transfers, small but consistent, made out to Marla Peterson. And the description? Child support. A secret child. I stared at the words until they blurred, tears stinging my eyes. It all made sense now, the crib, the toys, the guest house. She wasn't helping a friend. She was hiding her own child. And she was using my brother's estate to do it. I barely slept that night, replaying every conversation, every smile, every polite thank you from her. All of it had been part of a performance. But performances end eventually. And I decided, that next morning, it was time to raise the curtain. The next morning, the air felt strange, thick and expectant, like the moment before a storm. I drove to the vineyard before sunrise. The fog hung low over the rows of vines, and the smell of damp earth reminded me of my father's voice, his steady hand guiding mine as a child. "We take care of what we're given," he'd say, "and we never let greed rot the soil." By the time I reached the main house, Lights were already on inside. Through the kitchen window, I saw Clara pacing, phone in hand, her silk robe fluttering as she spoke in a sharp, hushed tone. I couldn't hear her words, but I caught one phrase. He doesn't need to know. I didn't wait for an invitation this time. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. She froze mid-sentence, then slowly lowered the phone. "Evelyn," she said, her tone sliding into that familiar practice sweetness. "You startled me." "I'm sure I did." Her gaze flicked toward the counter, where a thick folder lay half open. "Early visit. Couldn't sleep," I said. "Thought I'd come check on things." She smiled faintly. "You don't need to worry. Daniel and I have everything under control." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Is that why you've been paying child support to a woman named Marla Peterson?" Her expression didn't crack, not immediately, but there was a flicker, like a shadow behind her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said lightly. "Then you won't mind explaining why our family's trust is funding a child that doesn't exist." The silence that followed was unbearable. Only the ticking of the kitchen clock filled the air. Finally, she sighed as if bored. "You really don't understand the world we live in, do you, Evelyn? You and your sentimental notions of family and fairness. Life doesn't work that way." "I understand enough," I said. "You forged documents, manipulated my brother, and used our estate to cover your own past." She tilted her head, studying me. "My past is none of your concern. Not when it's paid with our inheritance, it is." Her jaw tightened. "I did what I had to do. That child is mine. My blood. I won't apologize for providing for her." I felt my stomach drop. "You have a daughter?" She exhaled softly, turning away. "I had her when I was very young. Her father was not someone I could depend on. I made mistakes. Daniel doesn't know. He doesn't need to." The way she said it, flat, calculating, made my chest ache. "So you married my brother for his money?" She turned back sharply. "No. I married him because he needed me. And yes, maybe I saw a chance to fix what I couldn't before. But that doesn't make me the villain." "You're stealing from us," I snapped, my voice trembling. She smiled, a slow, condescending curve of her lips. "Stealing is such a small-minded word. I'm reallocating. For a future that actually deserves it." That was the moment something inside me broke, not from anger, but from heartbreak. I saw in her expression a woman who truly believed her lies. She justified every act, every deception, until the truth no longer mattered. "Daniel will find out," I said quietly. She met my gaze, unflinching. "He won't believe you. He trusts me." And she was right, at least for now. I left the house trembling, the morning sun rising behind me, painting the vineyard in warm gold that felt almost cruel. For hours, I sat in my car on the dirt road, trying to think. Every instinct in me wanted to run to Daniel, to confront him with everything I'd found. But I knew if I went empty-handed, Clara would twist it, make me look jealous, bitter, overprotective. No. If I was going to bring her down, I needed proof. Ironclad, undeniable proof. So I went back to the one person who might help me, Mr. Adams. He didn't seem surprised when I showed up again that afternoon. "I thought I'd see you soon," he said, motioning for me to sit. I spread the documents across his desk, the transfers, the forged signatures, the child support payments. He examined them carefully, frowning. "This is bad," he murmured. "If what you're saying is true, Clara's committed multiple offenses: fraud, forgery, misappropriation." "I don't care about charges," I said, my voice cracking. "I just want to stop her." He nodded slowly. "We'll need to freeze the accounts before she drains them further. That means we'll have to notify Daniel, and possibly the bank." My chest tightened. "He won't listen to me." "Then show him the paper trail," Adams said gently. "Let the truth speak for itself." 2 days later, I invited Daniel to meet me at the old family barn. The one place that still felt untouched by all this deceit. The air smelled of oak and dust and memories. When he arrived, he looked wary, tired. "Evie, I don't have much time. Clara's been." "Sit down," I said firmly. He did, reluctantly. I laid out the documents one by one. The trust transfer. The account logs. the payment slips. And finally, the photo I'd found tucked into one of Clara's folders. A picture of a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with Clara's eyes. He stared at it for a long time. She told me she couldn't have children, he whispered. I'm sorry, I said softly. I didn't want you to find out like this. He swallowed hard, flipping through the pages with trembling hands. You're saying she's been paying for this child with our money? I nodded. She's not just hiding her past, Daniel. She's building her future, without you in it. He dropped the papers, burying his face in his hands. God. I thought she loved me. I reached out, touched his arm. She loved what you could give her. But that doesn't mean you can't take your life back. He looked up then, eyes red but sharp, focused for the first time in months. What do we do now? That question hung in the air between us. We both knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, legacy, and the kind of justice our father would have expected. I'll help you, I said. But we need to be careful. She's clever and she's desperate. People like her don't give up quietly. Daniel nodded slowly, a mix of grief and determination settling over him. For the first time in a long while, I saw the brother I remembered, the one who could laugh through storms, who believed in fairness, who used to tell me, no matter what, we keep our soil clean. Only now the soil wasn't under our feet. It was buried in lies. And together, we were about to start digging it all up. The days that followed felt like a strange blend of mourning and strategy. Daniel barely spoke at first. He spent most of his time in the study, pacing, staring at old photos of him and Clara, his eyes hollow. Sometimes I'd hear him muttering to himself, fragments of disbelief. She said she'd never lie to me. She told me I was her only one. The kind of words that bruise a man's pride and heart at the same time. I didn't push him. I just stayed close. Made coffee. Sat across from him in silence when he needed it. It's funny, grief doesn't always come when someone dies. Sometimes it arrives when the person you loved turns out to be someone else entirely. By the 4th day, Daniel spoke again. She thinks she's smarter than me, he said quietly. Let's show her she's not. We went to Mr. Adams that afternoon. He helped us set up a quiet hold on the estate's main accounts. Not a full freeze, just enough to flag any large withdrawals. Then, with Adams' guidance, we arranged to have an independent audit conducted under the pretense of routine estate reevaluation. It was our way of laying the trap. Let her think she's still in control, Adams advised. If she believes she's getting away with it, she'll slip up. And she did. 3 days later, I got a call from the bank manager, someone who'd known our family for decades. Miss Harper, he said carefully. We received an urgent request from Mrs. Harper to liquidate one of the smaller vineyard parcels. She said it was part of a private investment. My pulse quickened. That vineyard lot, the one near the stream, was one of Father's favorites. He used to call it the heart of the land. Clara had no right to touch it. Do not authorize it, I said firmly. There's an audit in process. He hesitated. Of course, ma'am. But I suspect she'll call you once she realizes. And she did, within the hour. Evelyn, she hissed through the phone. Why are you interfering with my financial decisions? That parcel is under Daniel's name. I took a breath. No, Clara. It's under the Harper Family Trust, which is still jointly governed. You can't sell what doesn't belong solely to you. Her tone sharpened. You're making a mistake. Daniel trusts me to handle this. He doesn't need you whispering in his ear. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Funny you should mention trust. Because it seems you've broken quite a lot of it. There was a pause. I could almost hear her pulse in the silence. What do you mean? She said finally. Oh, you know, I said softly. The forged signatures. The offshore transfers. The daughter. The line went dead. That night, the house was unnervingly quiet. Daniel and I sat by the fireplace, the same one our parents had built when they were newly married. He held his coffee cup with both hands, staring into the flames. She's going to come at us hard, he said. I know, I replied. But at least now she's cornered. He nodded slowly. I just can't believe I didn't see it. All those late-night calls, all those excuses about meetings. I wanted to believe her so badly. I reached over, placed a hand on his arm. Love makes fools of all of us, Daniel. Don't let her shame you for it. He gave me a small, broken smile. You sound like Mom. Maybe I did. Because I could almost hear her voice in the room too, steady, kind, but unflinching when it came to right and wrong. The next morning, Clara showed up at my door. She didn't knock gently this time. She banged sharp, angry, relentless. When I opened it, she was shaking, not with fear, but fury. How dare you interfere in my marriage, she spat. You think you can turn him against me? I stayed calm. You did that yourself. She stepped closer, eyes flashing. You don't understand what it's like to be me. To fight your whole life just to survive. You were born into comfort, into inheritance. I had nothing. Her voice cracked, but there was no softness in it, only bitterness. I met her gaze. Then you should understand more than anyone what it means to take what isn't yours. She laughed bitterly. You think your father's money makes you righteous? That old man never would have approved of me. You're just finishing what he started, trying to erase me. Her words hit harder than I expected, not because they were true, but because I could see her pain buried under the arrogance. She really believed the world owed her compensation for its cruelty. Clara, I said quietly, you could have had a family here. You didn't need to lie to us. She shook her head. Family doesn't feed you. Money does. And with that, she turned and stormed away. 2 nights later, the audit report came back. Mr. Adams called us into his office, his expression grim. She's been moving money into a shell company, he said, tapping a page. Under the name Eden and Company, owned by her friend, Marla Peterson. Daniel's face went pale. That's the same woman getting the child support payments. Exactly. The company doesn't exist beyond the paperwork. It's just a funnel. I closed my eyes, the final confirmation both relieving and devastating. We had her. Adams leaned forward. We'll need to act fast. File a legal injunction, notify the trust board, and alert the local authorities. She could flee if she senses what's coming. I looked at Daniel. Are you ready for that? He hesitated, then nodded. Yes. No more hiding. That evening, Daniel confronted her. I stayed nearby in the study, though I couldn't see them. Only hear the rise and fall of their voices through the thin walls. At first, Clara denied everything, her tone smooth and rehearsed. But Daniel had the documents. He laid them out one by one, his voice breaking as he spoke. You used me, Clara, he said. You lied to me every single day. Her silence stretched long. Then came the sound of glass breaking. Maybe she'd thrown something, maybe she'd just shattered inside. I did what I had to do, she screamed. I was protecting my child. And destroying mine, he shouted back. My father's legacy, my sister's trust. The silence after that was heavy, final. When she finally left the house that night, she didn't look back. The porch light flickered as her car disappeared down the gravel road. A single beam of white fading into the dark. For the first time in months, the house felt still, empty but peaceful. I could hear the night insects outside, the soft hum of crickets, the faint creak of the old staircase. Sounds that once annoyed me but now felt like old friends returning home. Daniel stood at the window, watching the road. She's gone, he said softly. Yes, I replied. But the mess she left behind isn't. He turned toward me, his eyes weary but clear. Then let's clean it together. And that's what we did. The weeks that followed were slow, but steady. When you're cleaning up betrayal, it's not like sweeping a floor. It's more like untangling a web. You pull one thread, and 3 more stick to you. The audit's findings were submitted to the estate board, and soon enough, it became official. Clara had been siphoning funds, forging signatures, and laundering family money through her friend's shell company. The moment that report hit the community, word spread like wildfire. In a town as small as ours, news traveled faster than wind on a stormy night. It started with whispers. She was too good to be true. Poor Daniel, always the trusting one. I heard she had another child somewhere. By the end of the week, Clara's name was everywhere. The same people who had once praised her grace and beauty now crossed the street to avoid her. I wish I could say I took pleasure in it, but I didn't. What I felt was relief. Not for her humiliation, but for the truth finally standing on its own. Daniel, though, he took no joy in it either. She wasn't all bad, he said one night, sitting across from me with a cup of black tea. His voice was softer now. The anger had drained away, replaced by something like acceptance. She loved her daughter, Evie. I think that's the only honest part of her. I nodded. Love doesn't excuse lies, but it does explain them sometimes. He looked at me for a long time, then said, maybe I wasn't listening closely enough. Maybe she told me who she was all along. I didn't argue. Sometimes realization is more powerful when it comes quietly. Meanwhile, the legal side took its course. The estate was restored under the original trust. Clara's name was formally removed as co-executor. The vineyard lots were returned, and the shell accounts frozen. Mr. Adams even arranged a meeting with the regional paper to issue a clarification, not to smear her, but to protect the family name. But not everyone agreed with that restraint. One afternoon, as I walked into the local cafe, I overheard two women talking near the counter. I heard she ran off to her sister's place in Denver, one whispered. Good riddance, the other said. Women like that give us all a bad name. Their laughter was sharp, judgmental, the kind that hides fear behind mockery. I didn't say anything, but my stomach turned. It wasn't right, not anymore. Clara had done terrible things, yes, but she was still human. That night, I found myself writing her a letter I would never send. You could have had a family here. You didn't have to steal it. I hope one day, you tell your daughter the truth, and teach her to be better than both of us. I sealed it, placed it in a drawer, and never mailed it. But somehow, writing it felt like closing a door that had been left open too long. One morning in late March, Daniel and I attended the final estate meeting. It was held in the courthouse, the same place where years ago, our father had signed the first version of the Harper Trust. The judge reviewed the audit, the amended documents, and nodded. Everything seems in order, he said. Mr. and Ms. Harper, your family estate is once again secured. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I exhaled. When we stepped outside, the air smelled like rain, that sweet, earthy scent that seeps into everything. The sky was heavy with clouds, but I didn't mind. Daniel stood beside me, staring at the courthouse steps. It's over, he said quietly. I smiled. Not over. Just beginning again. He chuckled softly. You always were the poetic one. Maybe. Or maybe I'd just learned that every ending is a kind of return. In the following weeks, we began to restore what had been broken. Not just the finances, but the family name, the land, and our sense of peace. The vineyard workers who'd been uncertain about their jobs returned. The air around the property felt lighter somehow. We even reopened the tasting room. Something Father had always dreamed of doing again. On the first day it opened, an older woman approached me at the counter. She had kind eyes and a weathered face. I just wanted to say, she murmured. What your brother's wife did, that could have been any of us. Sometimes desperation makes people do ugly things. Her words lingered with me. She wasn't defending Clara. She was just recognizing her humanity. And maybe that was what we all needed. Not revenge, not victory, but understanding. Then one afternoon, Daniel called me into the study. He was holding an envelope. No return address, no name. When he opened it, a photograph slid out. It was a picture of a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, standing in front of a small house somewhere unfamiliar. She had Clara's eyes. On the back, there were just 3 words written in neat cursive. She's doing fine. Daniel held the photo for a long time. His eyes shimmered, but he didn't cry. Finally, he said, "That's enough for me." We decided not to tell anyone. Some stories don't need to be shared. They just need to be held quietly in your heart. By summer, the estate was flourishing again. We renamed the vineyard Gracefield. Not after our father or the land, but after what we both felt we'd been forced to find, grace. People came by to taste the wine, to ask about the story, to marvel at the resilience. Sometimes Daniel would smile and say, "It's a long story, but it has a good ending." And I'd look at him, stronger, wiser, peaceful, and know that was true. Yet every so often, when the wind carried the scent of grapes and rain, I'd think of Clara. I wondered if she ever found peace, or if she was still running from her past, from herself. And though I didn't forgive her easily, I did hope someday she'd forgive herself. Because that's what betrayal does. It doesn't just wound you. It teaches you where your strength really lives. And for me, it was right here. In my home. In my blood. In the courage it took to finally say, no one can rewrite my story but me. It's been 2 years since that storm passed through my life. Sometimes, when I walk through the vineyard now, I still catch glimpses of the old world. My father's laughter echoing near the barn. Daniel's footsteps crunching in the gravel. Even Clara's voice, soft and persuasive, carried by the wind. The land remembers, even when people forget. The vines have grown stronger, thicker. Almost as if they, too, had to learn how to survive a little betrayal to become what they were meant to be. Daniel and I rebuilt what was broken, not just on paper but in spirit. He manages the estate now with quiet dignity. I handle the books, the community ties, the legacy side of things. Together we've made peace with the past, not by erasing it, but by understanding it. There's a saying my mother used to whisper whenever things went wrong. Grace isn't about forgetting the wound. It's about tending to it until it no longer owns you. And I think that's what I've done. Tended to it. I still remember the day the last document was filed, closing Clara's chapter in our family's records. I signed my name, then stared at the page for a long time. Not with anger, but with a strange kind of compassion. She had come into our lives like a storm, sudden, bright, destructive. But storms don't just tear things apart. They clear the air. They show you what's built to last. And what lasted, in the end, was love. Not the fragile kind that needs proof or promises, but the quiet, steady kind that endures. The kind between siblings, between a family and its history, between a woman and her own sense of worth. Sometimes visitors ask me how we survived it all. How we managed to move on after losing so much: money, trust, peace. I tell them the truth. We didn't survive by fighting harder. We survived by standing taller. It wasn't about revenge or getting even. It was about reclaiming my voice. The one that had been silenced by guilt, fear, and politeness. The voice that finally said, enough. There's a quiet power in standing your ground with grace. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't always feel triumphant. But it changes you deep down where no one else can see. Now, when the sun sets over Gracefield, the sky turns gold and violet, and I sit on the porch with a cup of tea. The air smells like ripe fruit and earth after rain. It's peaceful, not because everything is perfect, but because I finally am. I look at what remains, the laughter of workers harvesting grapes, Daniel humming as he locks the gate, the steady hum of life moving forward, and I realize, I didn't lose my inheritance. I became it. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, I want to tell you this. You are not foolish for believing in them. You are brave for loving in a world that often rewards deceit. And when that love breaks, as it sometimes will, don't let the bitterness harden you. Let it refine you like fire to gold. Because every heartbreak leaves behind a little wisdom. Every lie teaches you where your truth begins. And every ending, no matter how painful, carries the seed of a better beginning. Soft piano fade out. Would you have done what I did? Would you have fought back? Or walked away? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if my story touched you, don't forget to subscribe, so you don't miss the next one. Until then, take care of your heart and remember, sometimes the hardest part of protecting your family is learning you belong to it too.